This title from RT says, Pay Up Zook, Canada allies with Australia in battle against Facebook over news content. I called this. I said every country, after what Australia did, every country now is going to look at big tech and they're going to say, you know what? We should also get fees for the content that these guys use. Remember, Facebook, Google, they take content essentially for free, definitely for free, and they monetize that content. Now, big media companies, for example, in Australia, like News Corp, Murdoch's News Corp, they said enough of this. And they've been pushing for legislation for a long time now. Ever since Facebook, Twitter, and Google decided to act like publishers and deplatform a US president and start censoring everybody like crazy. In other words, they're not acting like a platform, an independent, unbiased platform. They're acting now as a biased, politically motivated publisher. The minute they started doing this, I suspect that Murdoch and News Corp saw their opening. They pressured the Morrison government in Australia to push the legislation forward, and they got what they wanted. They struck deals with Google. They're now going to get paid for the content that Google licenses and puts on their Google News and Google Search. They also, in that deal, they have all kinds of YouTube incentives packaged into that deal. Facebook said, hell no, we're not going to work with publishers in Australia. We're just going to outright ban any types of news posts in Australia, which is actually a blessing in disguise because we know that Facebook manipulates news in order to push a narrative. But now you have Canada following suit with what Australia did, and they're going to do the same thing. Once again, without a doubt, the Canadian media moguls and Canadian media companies, without a doubt, went to the Trudeau government and they said, you know what, we want in on this action that Rupert Murdoch and News Corp is getting in Australia. We want a cut of this action as well. So you need to pressure big tech and get them to pay up for the content that they use on their news services. So Google, without a doubt, is going to start negotiations with Canadian media companies, and they're going to start paying fees in order to use the content that Canadian media companies provide. Facebook now is stuck. What does Facebook do? What does Facebook do? Do they now decide to play ball with Canada, with Canadian publishers, but not play ball with Australian publishers? Or do they now completely pull out of the news business in Canada as well? After Canada, who's next? The UK, France, Germany, Russia? Who's next? The list, it's just going to be country after country after country. Media company after media company in every single country is going to pressure their local government, and they're going to say, we want fees from big tech. We want a revenue stream. And either big tech is going to comply or they're going to pull out of the news business. Facebook now is stuck. If they agree with Canada, they're going to have to go back to Australia, tail between their legs, and they're going to have to go to the Australian media companies and say, okay, fine. We'll now pay for news content that's published on our platform and shared on our platform. It's going to be a huge hit to Facebook's bottom line. So let's see what RT says. Pay Up Zook, Canada allies with Australia in battle against Facebook over news content. Following Australia's lead, Canada has announced that it aims to force Facebook to pay for news content. Ottawa said it would not be intimidated if the tech giant seeks retribution. Big mistake. Big mistake, Dorsey. Big mistake, Zook. Big mistake, Google. Big mistake, YouTube, in banning US President Trump, in censoring so many people. Big mistake in acting like a publisher. If you had stayed a platform and you stayed unbiased and independent and just flew under the radar, just sat there and just be happy with the billions that you're collecting, then all of this, I'm positive all of this would not have happened. And it's going to get worse for them. But you spooked everybody on the left and on the right. This is the Trudeau government. The Morrison government has acted. Now you have the Trudeau government acting. If the Trudeau government acts like this, what's the Boris Johnson government going to do? What's the Putin government going to do? The Merkel government, the Bolsonaro government. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, country after country. You think Brazil's not going to follow suit? You think Brazilian publishers aren't going to want a cut of this action? It'd be crazy. If I ran a media company in Brazil, I'd be saying to Bolsonaro, I'd be, look at what Australia did. Look at what Canada did. We want some revenues too. It's, oh my God. So, Canadian Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault said on Thursday that he would begin drafting legislation that could resemble Australia's bid to make Facebook and other companies pay a licensing fee to feature domestically created content on their platforms. Canada is at the forefront of this battle. We are really among the first group of countries around the world that are doing this. Listen to those words, guys. We are among the first group of countries around the world that are doing this. The first group, Facebook, Google, eventually Twitter. Why not? Twitter should pay a licensing fee for the news posts that are shared on its platform. Well, it's not a platform that is shared on its publishing site. Why not? But they're the first group of countries, which means what? There's going to be a second group of countries, and there's going to be a third group of countries. They brought this all onto themselves. He said that Ottawa was also considering a less forceful approach. France, for example, has required tech companies to enter into negotiations with publishers regarding financial compensation without forcing the issue. Guilbeault said the government was still deciding which model would be the most appropriate, adding that he was in consultations with colleagues in France, Australia, Germany, and Finland about how to best secure compensation from Facebook. Well, the best model is going to be the model that gives the media moguls the most money, right? So, if I'm a media mogul and I'm in Canada, which model do I want? The French one, which paid peanuts to the publishers, or do I want the Australian one, which paid a lot to the publishers? I'm going to push for the Australian one. Obviously, I'm going to take Trudeau and I'm going to say, look, man, either you give me the Australian compensation or I'm going to start publishing some really bad crap about you. Which one? France is going to renegotiate, by the way. I'll put money on it. That France is going to look at what Australia did and they're going to say, man, we got screwed in this deal. And they're going to renegotiate with Google. The minister predicted that soon more than a dozen countries could adopt rules requiring the Silicon Valley behemoth to pay for news content. The announcement comes days after Facebook blocked all Australian news content on its platform in response to draft legislation that would require it to pay fees to domestic outlets and publishers whose links and content appear on the site. Guilbeault said that Facebook would be unable to take similar actions if more countries followed suit, describing the company's approach to the issue as totally unsustainable. Absolutely right. This guy knows that Facebook's screwed. As I said in the beginning of the video, what does Facebook do? Do they negotiate with Canada but leave the Australian news market? And when the UK wants money, what do they do then? And when Brazil wants money, and when Greece wants money, and Italy, and every country, what does Facebook do? Pick and choose the countries that it decides to pay a licensing fee to, but leave the news market in other countries? Totally unsustainable. Either you're in the news sharing business or you're not. The global news sharing business, or you're not. Facebook could say we're not going to share news anywhere in the world except the US, where we have the politicians in our pocket. Or they could go and lobby every politician and put every politician around the world in their pocket. It's also going to cost money. Facebook is, they screwed themselves. Twitter, I hope you're next. Twitter should be next. Yeah. If I was running a media company, I would just be, if I was a media mogul in Canada, I would just be calling Trudeau every second of every day and just being, Justin, this is Alex. I want to get paid for the content I create. Otherwise, I've got 100 freaking stories about you that I'm just going to start publishing like crazy. So you better negotiate a sweet deal for my company. We better get some revenue on this. Oh, man. Facebook isn't the only tech giant in Ottawa's crosshairs. Guilbeault said that Google could also be subject to future legislation. At the moment, the company is currently in talks with Canadian publishers about using content for its news showcase service. Google has already reached a deal with Australian outlets, bypassing the current conflict between Canberra and Facebook. Exactly. Google is playing ball. Google is saying that they're going to absorb the expenses and they're going to stay in the news business. So they're going to pay up. But you know what? Google has the assets and they have the properties to negotiate good deals with publishers. They have the money, they have the properties that they can go to the publishers with and say, you know what, we'll pay you a licensing fee, we'll make it X amount, but we're also going to sweeten the deal by giving you promotion and sponsorship on YouTube. That's exactly what they did with News Corp. That's what they'll do with all types of publishers. So they'll try to lessen the expense, like the monetary expense on the licensing, but they'll throw in all kinds of other caveats on their other properties, mainly YouTube, which really fits nicely with what these guys do. I mean, YouTube is so complementary to what a News Corp does. Instagram, you think Instagram is complementary to a News Corp? No. WhatsApp? No. No, Facebook's got nothing. They've got their news feed. That is it. Facebook is screwed. Facebook is screwed. They're gonna go back to Australia and they'll negotiate, and they'll start negotiating with every country. They don't have a choice. Or they're gonna pull out of news. All right. If they pull out of news, that's great. We don't get the toxic news manipulation that Facebook is famous for. So that's a win for us. So that's a good thing. All right, guys, that's the video. Hit that subscribe button on the way out. Look for me on Rumble, on BitChute, and on Odyssey. Look for the Duran's main channel where we're posting news every day. Look for Alexander's channel. It's also linked down below. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch. And what else? What else do I have? That's it. Take care, everybody.